Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another Big Love Season 1 review. After watching this episode, I have come to the conclusion that Bill is careless and he is dumb. And his mission to bring down Juniper Creek, like some of you all have said, probably will destroy him and his family. I don't think that Bill is thinking about Endgame. I think that Bill is so set on getting to Roman that he's not remembering all the things that Roman has done in the past and what Roman can do should he continue to mess with him the way that he is. This man is a man who randomly has his sons showing up at your house and your place of business and breaking into said place of business and taking files and blocking you on sales and kicking your parents out and doing all the things that he does and watching your every move and at some point having something to do with your grandfather no longer being here. This is a man that took over his I don't know, group. And as a result of that has now made it so that he is the prophet. And yet you don't think that he won't still come after you. So we got Barb, and Barb is selected as one of the finalists for Mother of the Year award. And we got Bill, who's being asked to be a member of the Salt Lake City Leadership League. And I'm seeing all of this and realizing that this episode is just not about these things or the will that it's titled as. I think that this episode really gives us a little bit more insight into how all of these people's lives are affected by them being polygamous, because everything that they do is under a microscope and puts them at risk. We also see in this episode that despite what we saw last week, that the wives are not on the same page, that they don't think the same way, that their beliefs are not the same way. And it makes me wonder how they've been able to manage successfully as a polygamous family for the 7 years, I'm assuming, or maybe 6, that Nikki has been a part of it when there's such a big difference in the way that they view their faith. And I wonder if part of the reason why the Browns that we see today weren't as successful, because over the years it seemed like they had this very problem that everybody's beliefs were a little different, and as a result they couldn't get on the same page about certain things. But let's begin. In the last episode, the Henriksons had this beautiful moment as a family, this beautiful moment where Teeny and Marge got baptized. So I thought that when this episode began that they would be united, but I was wrong, because almost immediately they were right back to their selfish ways. Let me explain. The meeting. So the ladies have the meeting at Barb's house because Barb decided to change her will. Now the entire family is looking at their wills. So Barb announces that their attorney has looked over them and made some adjustments. And basically, if any of the wives die, the kids automatically go to Bill first. If Barb passes, it goes from Bill to Nikki. If Nikki passes, it goes from Bill to Barb. And if Marge passes, it goes from Bill to Nikki. Notice how nobody is giving their kids to Marge, right? Everyone agrees with this in each other's faces. I mean, they're giving each other props for how far they've come and how they've been able to do this. And they're saying how much they love each other and how happy they are. But it takes no time once they're out of each other's faces for them to switch it up, because a lot of what they do is fake. A lot of what they do may be considered keeping sweet. We later see Marge ask Barb if it's okay for her, which I don't understand why she has to ask permission, but it just goes to show you that as number one, a lot of times they feel like they got to come to Barb. So she's asking Barb, is it all right if I were to have my children go to you and not to Nikki? It's not that I feel Nikki's a bad mom. I think Nikki's a great mom, but I just feel like, Barb, you're so good, and my kids are more connected to you, to the point where there are times where they'll reach out to you, Barb, before they reach out to me. Barb says, look, I think we should talk to her about it, but I don't know how we would go about it. And, you wouldn't want to hurt her. So they decide amongst the two of them, thus keeping this a secret from Nikki, that they're going to let the attorney know and that it will be confidential. Well, she tells her to just keep it confidential between her and the attorney. Next, we head to the attorney's office and we hear him talking and we're like, oh, you want to change your will. I'm thinking that is going to be Marge in the seat. But it's not Marge, it's Nikki. She's like, look, Nikki's great. She's a great mother and she's a great person. But I would like for my children to go to my parents at Juniper Creek. Nikki, to me, watching this episode and throughout the others, seems to be the one that's most invested in the cult and their beliefs, whereas Barb, Marge, and Bill kind of seem to be more focused on just polygamy and not necessarily beliefs of the cult that he was kicked out of. Hearing her later tell the attorney that she wants her kids to be with her parents if anything were to happen to her shocked me. So we got Marge. Marge goes to that same attorney's office and says that she wants to change her will. So the attorney steps out. The paralegal walks in, not knowing who is who, gives her the paperwork. She's like, oh, you finished it already? Great. But it's the wrong paperwork. She's all excited about how quick it is, and she starts to read it, and she realizes that, wait a second, this is Nikki's paperwork. So the paralegal goes to take it back, and she slides it closer to her as she continues to read. And of course, she goes back to Barb when she reads that Nikki wants her kids to go on the compound. And she shares the information with Barb, and Barb confronts Nikki. Barb is like, why would you do that? And then you got Nikki. It's this place. It's the bad values. You have fine values most of the time, Barb, but it's the culture here. It's the disrespect, the loose morals. I want my children raised in an environment where God is not under attack, where God hasn't been taken out of the schools, where the 10 Commandments are shown in a public place. And I was like, oh, okay, Nikki. Nikki, is interesting how you have morals about that, but how you don't have any type of feelings about being in debt. I guess you being in debt is okay. I guess you spending money the way that you spend money is okay. And I guess y'all lying the way that you lie is okay. Got it. But some of the other things like the clothing choices and the things of that are loose morals. Okay. So Barb is upset because they all agreed that the kids would be raised together. That was the whole purpose in this thing. And she does not want her kids, their kids, and definitely not her kids being brought up on the compound. Nikki's like, look, we could just agree to disagree. But Barbara's like, no. And Marge is over there shaking her head in agreement. So we see Barb then call the attorney asking for a new will. And she's like, look, as far as who's going to get my kids, can you just leave it blank for right now as we figure it out? So Marge is trying to make sure that Nikki doesn't know that she changed her will. So she's running after Barb, asking her that. And Barb is just upset because she can't believe that Nikki is over here trying to act like the compound has such great values based off of the things that we've seen the compound do. And I'm team Barb in this because you have underage brides. You're finding slick ways to do some of the stuff that you're doing. You got the prophet who just up and decides when wives are no longer going to be with their husbands and sending people away and kicking people out their homes and all these other things. But you're trying to act like this is such a great place. She says women are meant to be at home while the men work. We see Bill later on talking to Don, and he asks Don, without talking to his wives, if anything were to happen to him and his wives, if they would keep his kids. And he's so honored. Just goes to show you once again that when it comes to Margene, they have no faith in her. It's this entire episode of them considering Margene at the last minute, right? I feel like nobody truly appreciates her. Not to say that Margene doesn't have her stuff with her, but she does add a different layer to the family, even though she's mighty young. On to Ernest. Now, I thought that Ernest was a double agent, but I was wrong. So because I'm recording this early, I do not know yet what the comments are based on the last review. But if you were in the comment section and you said that we should trust Ernest, then you were right. Okay. Wendy comes into Bill's office, lets him know that a man by the name of Ernest is in the housewares section insisting to see you. It is not lost on me that Wendy, who's supposed to handle the books, always seems to be everywhere else but in front of the computer handling said books. Why is it that she's always the one who's bringing information to him? Is there not a salesperson? Is there not a manager on the floor could do this? I doubt that they called Wendy of all people to come and handle this, which makes me feel like Wendy is going to be a problem. And I was right. We'll get to it. He lets Bill know that at the council meeting, they talked for over 30 minutes and laughed about the ways that they would like to see Bill gone. To me, that is alarming, especially considering he hasn't done anything yet, number one. Number two, considering what has been done to his grandfather. Number three, was Frank there for these meetings? Because he's supposedly part of the council. So Frank, are you okay with these men talking like this about your son and about how they would like to see him gone and about what the things that they would like to do to him? Not right. So he lets them know, that not only did they talk about that, but they talked about some of the things that are going on. And right now they are currently negotiating a contract with NASA, which Bill finds that to be ironic because they don't even believe that any men walk the moon. So if you don't believe in space exploration, why would you want to work with them? Is basically what he's saying. So he says, I'm at the store to give you this. So he gives him paperwork that has the shares that he's been issued back since 1962. He's giving Bill the shares because Bill's intentions are to buy him out so that he can take his place on the UEB council. He talks to his attorney about this later, and his attorney does not want him to do it. He doesn't feel like it's a good idea. But Bill, because Bill is all-knowing and thinks he has everything, and because he doesn't want to listen to anyone's advice, isn't taking his advice and tells the attorney, who at some point says, I'm telling you this as a friend. And he's like, well, I need you to handle this as my attorney and get this done. He needs to take his advice, but he's not going to. So he tells him that evaluating the shares coming from the UEB is going to take a lot, because who's to say what it really means, considering that this so-called paperwork is coming from the UEB, and the UEB is not to be trusted on a lot of things because they rob people left and right. That's what he's saying. He didn't come out and say it, but that's what he's saying. We later see Albie with a computer, and he's showing his father all these photographed images of Bill and Ernest and some of the wives meeting up. Roman wants to know how long this is going on. Albie says, I don't know. And he calls him a Judas. Roman had no idea what Ernest was doing. So Albie later on and two guys go up to beat up Ernest. I cannot remember how old Ernest is, but this is a much older gentleman, probably in his 70s. He's on oxygen and utilizes a wheelchair for his mobility. It did not require all of that. It did not require you beating him up, tearing up the outside of his home and things of that nature. It just wasn't right. Ernest tells Bill, look, I don't regret what I did, because Bill comes to check in on him. But at this point, I need you to hurry up and sell my shares, because I need to get out of here. This man has been beat up. This man has been threatened. This man has been tortured in some ways. And he is more concerned about whether or not they know that Ernest, Bill is, sold the shares to him than the fact that this older gentleman has a patch on his eye and a bruise on his face and it looks like he's been roughed up. That's what you're most concerned about. So he tells him that Roman has reassigned his wives to another man. I thought it was just two wives, but it looked like it was four of them, right? So Bill is telling them, you don't have to go. You don't have to go just because he told you to do so. And one of the wives is like, the prophet told me to. I gotta go. So he looks at her and says, so if he told you to jump off the bridge, would you do that too? And because of how ingrained they are in this, because of how much they believe this, because they feel like what the prophet says goes, that woman actually stands there and pauses to think about it. And even though this is just a show, it made me realize how many people are stuck in this thing because they're worried about what will happen to them if they leave. They're worried about damnation. That, in my opinion, isn't going to happen, because you're not getting to celestial nothing through another man. You have to do things off of your own works. My opinion. Tell me yours. So he's like, look, I have nothing to my name. I'm an old man. I have no pension. I have no income. I have no social security. I have nothing. And he's panicking because Albie has threatened him and told him that they'll kill him. It just shows you how trapped they are, because if they leave, they literally are leaving with the clothes on their backs, because this man, this cult, controls everything. He has been with them all these years. You're talking about having paperwork that dates back to the 1960s, and he doesn't have anything, not a home, not or anything, because it's all in the UEB's name. Crazy. So we see Ben and his boo. Ben has been avoiding her in some ways. At some point, she calls and she wants to talk to him, and he's not talking to her. And he tells her, okay, my notes are out of order again. How do I keep doing this? You know what it is, y'all? It's because this thing jumps around so much that sometimes I give myself titles and talk about it, but then I remember I talked about this in another section because, okay, so let me jump down a little bit and then come back up. Barbara lets Sarah know that Rhonda will be staying at the house with them for a week. She is representing Juniper Creek for a drama competition. Sarah doesn't really want her around, especially because she thinks that Rhonda stole her iPod, which she did. Her iPod. Barb thinks it will be good. Bryn is calling while they're having the conversation. See, this should be up there. Bryn is calling while they're having the conversation. And we see that Ben has been dodging her calls and not talking to her because he thinks that they're moving too fast. But instead of saying all that to her, he tells this to Marge. So Marge is like, look, holding back is okay. You should hold back, because if you don't, you'll regret it. She says, I wish that I was as smart as you, Benny. She says, because my first time wasn't special at all. It was with some boy from the apartments next door. Whereas Ben, you were taught that this is sacred. Back to Bryn and the boo at the track, what I was talking about ahead of time. So he's running out the track. Running. And he's been dodging Bryn since they had sex. So she wants to make sure that he's not one of those guys who are just going to run off. And she's waiting there to kind of ask him about it. He says, no, that's not what he's going to do. She goes to kiss him and he's like, I'm all sweaty. And the next thing you know, they are making out on the track. And then it goes from the track to a corner of the track. And there is more passion and the kissing that is happening outside on the track than there was with them having sex. And who pulls up while they're passionately kissing? Marge and Nikki. So Nikki sees this and she honks on. She's like, to get his attention. And she's like, this is why Barb should be at home. This is why she should be a stay-at-home mom. Whether she's a stay-at-home mom or not, kids are going to do what they want to do. They find ways of sneaking out all the time. Y'all are two stay-at-home moms and you're leaving to go pick him up. So guess what? He would have had an opportunity to do this anyway. But Nikki wants to look down on him. So they are introduced as neighbors, once again showing you how often they lie and how often they deceive. And the ladies take him and is like, your mom was busy. She asked us to come and pick you up. So Brenda's like, oh, I really want to meet, his mom and dad and yada, yada, yo. And Nikki's like, yeah, we know you haven't met them. Nikki is a little bit more standoffish. Marge is a little bit friendlier. So they get home. Nikki and Marge let them know that they met Bren and that they met her because when they went to pick up Ben, they were kissing behind the track. And Marge is like, they were really kissing, which they were because his hands were roaming all over her body as they were kissing. And Barb is like, well, did you guys say something to him about it? And they say no. And of course, Nikki, making a dig, says that she didn't know where her standing was basically on it because she doesn't know, if they share the same values. And Barbara's like, come off of it, Nikki. Like, get over yourself. Later on, we see Barb tell Nikki that that's it. She wants to meet him. No more excuses because it's been meet Bren because it's been multiple times where she's tried to meet her and he's come up with an excuse. So no more excuses. Okay, I did the Sarah and Barb part because I jumped. Okay. Rhonda and Adeline are at Nikki's house. That girl is a sociopath and they need to watch her. That's all I'm going to say. So Nikki asks her mother if anything has happened. If anything happens with her and Bill, can her and her dad take care of the kids? And her mom's like, no, we're not doing it. That's the job of your sister wives. She's like, what's going on? She's like, I'm not sure, Mom, if Barb will, continue to live in the principal and, Margene, she's just not an option. Once again, she doesn't matter. She says, work it out and be happy. Now, we later see Nikki approach Margene and act like she thought about this and it was her idea. And she wants her to take, her children if anything were to happen. And Nikki, will take Margene's. And you see Margene get a little hesitant as she's outside working and she turns around and she lets her know, you're a great mom, Nikki, but, I want Barb to have them. And Nikki looks annoyed. And she's like, Nikki, you're a great mom, but you're just not warm, Nikki. You're not warm. You can't help it that you're not warm. It's not your fault. And it kind of isn't, but she can work on it. You could tell that her upbringing was cold. Look, we all have to do things. In my family, we weren't overly affectionate. Am I still overly affectionate? No, but it's something that I've worked on to show affection, to make sure that I pull my son in, well, lean up really, and pull him down to give me a hug and kiss him on the cheek or whatever. There's things that you can do to work on it. And she tells her to give her a hug. And Nikki's like, I give hugs, but I'm not going to give one just because you told me to. We see Rhonda and Heather and Sarah in the room, and Rhonda is doing an excerpt. Did I say that right? An excerpt from a play that she's going to be doing for this drama contest she's supposed to be a part of. And her interpretation of it is all wrong because, of course, she's relating it back to, religion and things of that nature. And Sarah's like, that's not what my teacher said. And she's like, well, your teacher's wrong. So she lets them know that her goal is to win this competition, go to DC, then from DC to go to New York because she wants to live in a dormitory with a bunch of girls so she can keep her virtue about her and become an actress. Now, she hasn't been to school since she has been permanently placed with the prophet because she's going to be marrying the prophet on her birthday. At the audition, we see that Rhonda does not move on to the next round. She approaches the officiant, basically accuses him of not allowing her to move on to the next round because of the way she dresses and where he's from. He denies it, and she tells him that he made a mistake, and she kicks him. She kicks the mess out of him because he didn't pick her. So as she's approaching the girls, Sarah and Heather are outside talking about all the things that Rhonda doesn't know. Like she doesn't know who George Bush is and things of that nature. And, Sarah's like, that's not uncommon. There's a lot of things that my father didn't know either because schooling is not as important to them. And how, she's 15, so there isn't a lot that she knows. And then Heather is like, she's 15 and she's going to marry that old man. She's going to be 16 years old and she's going to be marrying Roman. I think that she heard part of the conversation. Y'all tell me if you think that she did. So she runs out and lies to the girls and tells them that she made it to the next round. She then later tries to cause division, I think, with Sarah and Heather because she tells Sarah that she likes Heather, but she doesn't trust her. And originally, those were my thoughts. And then I realized that it isn't that she's trying to create division. It's that because of their lifestyle, she sees that Heather, in some ways, isn't going to understand them and may be a possible threat to them being exposed. Y'all tell me if that's what you got from it. Because at first I was like, look at this girl trying to cause problems with them. And then I thought about it. And what made me think differently about it was when Heather later is fussing and she's talking about how she got an idea and she wants to try to save Rhonda and try to figure out a way to let people, know what's going on and to save her without having to tell about the community and blah, blah, blah. And she's going back and forth about it with Sarah. And Sarah's like, look, I know that it's wrong. I don't agree with it. I don't feel like she should do it. But do you ever think that maybe it's what she agrees with and what she feels? And then Sarah says, I can't do too much of anything because I'm in a position where me saying too much or doing too much exposes my family as well. That's what made me think, okay, maybe she wasn't being messy. We also see later on that Sarah goes to check on Rhonda and how she's doing in the competition just to find out that she didn't make it to the next round. All right, on to Bill. Bill is excited about joining this leadership league. He feels like it's a dream come true. He's thinking about how much this will benefit his business. He tells Don and Paige about it, and they're worried about, Peg, they're worried about it exposing him. And Peg is like, the league is full of LDS, meaning those Mormons don't want any parts of you. So he tells them that someday he'll like to be able to give out grants and, support institutions and award scholarships. He very much so is having that bald eagle energy, like he can do it all, be a politician probably too. So Peg walks out because she don't want to hear it. And Donna says, at this point, my wife isn't going to be a part of any organization that doesn't accept us. I can understand that because who wants to keep hiding all their life? So we see Barb and Bill, they're having sex. After they have sex, he's like, oh, I love you so much. And then they do what they always do. They have discussion about things that I don't think I personally would be discussing after I have sex, but this is what they want to do. So the subject of the lead comes up and how excited he is about it because we find out he applied 8 or 9 years ago and he got rejected. And they talk about how the both of them had wanted this so badly before. And Barb questions if they should still want it because they decided not to go public and be public once they decided to change things and be with Nikki. She feels like all these lies they're telling, all this hiding that they're having to do will come back and bite them. A lot of this faith is about lies and hiding, and I feel like that creates even more issues. She says this puts a lot of pressure on her because when it comes down to the other wives, she's getting to always be seen in the forefront and they're not. I could see how that would be an issue too, which then made me think about Cody. Cody very much so like to act like he was living in hiding all this time. I think that Christine was. I don't think Cody was, because if you tell us stories later on about how you showed up at different functions with different wives, then you weren't in hiding. Whereas in this situation, he always shows up with Barb. He doesn't bring anybody else. Interesting, right? So he points out that, look, you're talking about me being in the spotlight, but you being Mother of the Year is an issue too, because it's not just a little event. And she says, no, it's just a little event. And we see later on that she's wrong and Bill was right, because you're expected to speak and attend events and do all these other things because you're the face of Moms of Utah. And we also found out that she was picked basically because of her cancer, because that's how a lot of these women were picked. And he talks about how it metastasizing helped you with this. And I said, what type of crap is that to say? But knowing that it metastasized lets us know just how bad this situation was for Barb and how close she was to losing her life. So we see him later meet up with the head of the organization to play golf. And before the meeting, he's trying to figure out a way to move money. I'm not sure. Y'all tell me if it has something to do with Ernest. Even though him switching things around and causing more things for his mortgages, he feels like this is the best thing. So he tells them that one thing that he respects about Bill is how he left his polygamous family and how he spoke out against them. And he just thinks that that's really, really great. Later, we see Bill in the shower when he gets a call from the same leader that he went to play golf with about possibly joining. And he lets Nikki know this, and Nikki is against it. And she's like, why would you just telling me this? I'm against you joining the league, and I'm against Barb in this whole situation, making her skeptical of herself as mother of the year. She tells him that he's putting his desires before the welfare of the family. He is. Which family is he thinking about? The family that he had 7 years ago, or the family that they have now? I said, okay, there we have it, which goes back to the fact that Nikki did not come into the picture until Barb was sick, which goes back to the fact that at one point it doesn't seem like they were going to live this lifestyle. She tells them that if he does this, he's going to have to hide, and him hiding makes him half a man. He tells her she is hypersensitive and that it's probably partially because she's the second wife, and that, you know, her version of him hurts him. And the next thing you know, because Nikki's like, you're not about to talk to me like that, Nikki flushes the toilet so that the cold water disappears and all he has is hot water. I laughed when she did it in the scene. We later see him talking about how he was kicked out and things of that nature on this video, but how, you know, the people who are in that community are still good people who are just stuck in the community. And it gets me to thinking, at what point was he done? And was it when he got kicked out at 14, or was it something else? And what other than Nikki made him feel like this had to be the way? Because you could have just got the one wife, Nikki, and kept it at that, but he got another one. So more than anything, I think that this episode showed that Bill and Barb wanted more, that they wanted to be in the spotlight and they didn't want to be hidden. But because of this, their acceptance of Nikki into their family changed all of that, which is why it's important to see that even the way Barb handled the situation when the press came over, with her closing the blinds and the camera flashing and stuff, and Nikki observing and Nikki noticing it, shows that this often causes tension with their family. So she doesn't tell Nikki that the press is coming over, but Nikki walks in knowing that this is probably what's going on, and sees the photographer taking pictures of Barb and the 3 kids, and Nikki stands there with her 2 boys, and Barb is telling the photographer, like, this is my neighbor Nikki. I said, Nikki sure knows how to make a moment awkward. So Nikki's older son is asking why they can't be in the picture, and the photographer's like, oh, because it's just for the family. I said, even the little baby's got to hide, because he could have said, we are family, but he didn't. We later see the representative from the Leadership League. I should have wrote down his name, so I stopped saying that. Call talks about how, you know, he saw this documentary that saw this polygamous cult and compared it to the American Taliban, how women were prisoners, men are tyrants. And he's like, you still got family back there, don't you? Must be a heavy weight on you and all these other things. And I don't like Bill, there's no way you can do this. So the application comes in by way of Don, and he tells him that, you know, you got to be careful. There's certain sacrifices that we agreed to make when we became a part of our faiths. So he ends up turning it down because he doesn't want to risk their family being discovered. We see Barb later tell Nikki that she can't promise that she won't be a part of the principal, or will be a part of the principal, if Bill dies, but she does love Nikki and her kids. Nikki's like, do you think that I'm warm? And Barb says no. And she nudges her a little bit and they smile at each other. Nikki, no, not Nikki. Oh, Nikki smiles. Next thing we know, Marge is outside and she faints from all her hard work in the sun. We find out later that she's pregnant, and she announces it to the wives and the kids, and none of them seem excited. It's very much so anticlimactic, the way it was when the bird presented the fact that she was with child to the other brown kids. We then see Ernest and his 4 wives, and they're getting on the bus because he's getting out, and he says he never thought this day would come. Ernest lets Bill know, he warns him that once Roman finds out that I've allowed you to take my seat on the council, that you're going to have to watch out for yourself. Remember what I told you about your grandfather and that it was the truth. And please remember that on your journey. Remember the journey thing, because later on at the end, we see a clip of him talking about the journey, right? So Wendy's nasty, nosy tail is in Mr. Hendrickson's office to drop off a file. She looks on his desk where the accordion folders are, manila folders are, files are, whatever you want to say. And on the label, very neatly put up, not face down or anything like that, it says Hendrickson Wills. Now, any other person would know, I don't know, HIPAA, compliance, privacy, all those other things, that you shouldn't be going through other people's stuff. But Wendy feels very entitled here, and Wendy does whatever the hey-ho Wendy wants to do. So she opens it up, and she sees all the different wives' names as well as Bill's. She takes a piece of paper out of the trash and begins to write down some of the names on the list as he walks in and sees her holding said folder. She puts the paper in her back pocket and says that she inadvertently picked up the wrong file as she hands it to him. Wendy isn't trying to hide the fact that she knows what you got going on. Why would that fool leave paperwork like that out in the open in his office, especially because he knows that Wendy already suspects Don of being a polygamist, and now he's on that list too. So the next thing you know, she's at her desk and she has her, her crumped up paper around her, and she has a legal pad where she's writing these different family names, and she has each wife's name at the top and their address. Yes, she does. And she has Bill's name, and she done went and found out his business, did some research to look it up and see that Bill has not one, not two, but 3 mortgages, all for each one of those houses, and it all has these ladies' names in there. And she has Roman's name written on the paper, and she circles it a bunch of times. I said, Bill, you dummy. She knows. She knows. We pan back to the video from many years ago of Bill, with Bill saying that he doesn't know where the journey is going to lead him, but he's going to walk it fearlessly as he touches Marge's pregnant belly, does like this, leans into her, and that's the end of the episode. Y'all tell me what you thought of this one, because baby, hey, baby. We found out a lot. And I hope that nothing happens to Ernest. I hope that him and his wives are being set up well, because that's not one, but I think 5 mouths, because I think that all 4 of them went with him. I'm assuming so, because we saw them pushing stuff under the bus. I hope that Ernest is really free. And I'm interested to see what happens next. Y'all let me know what you thought of this video. Until next time.